Welcome to Talks in 10. It's a short online interview hosted by the Enviro Pet Waste Network. We're a nonprofit organization connecting people to information supporting pet waste disposal methods in a kinder that are kinder to the planet. I'm Ryan Torres. I'm VP of Parks Operations for Battery Park City Authority. I'm here in New York City in the USA, and I'll be talking with Devin Gorson from Marsha P. Johnson State Park in the Williamsburg, Brooklyn area, also in New York City. We'll talk about the park's on-site dog waste composting program. It was really the first of its kind and has been operating successfully for almost 6 years. We're going to talk with Devin, who's going to update us on the program, how it's going, what she's learned, what's going next. We just ask that everybody please mute your microphones so that we can just maybe try to minimize the background noise. At the end, we'll have plenty of times for questions, so we can unmute then. You can also feel free to throw something in the chat and we'll kind of monitor that as well. So if you think of a question midway conversation, just throw it in the chat. We'll get it at the end. So before we really get started, I wanted to just give Devin a second here to say hi to the group, and maybe you can just briefly let us know about your role over at your park.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. It's been a little while since I've been able to talk dog waste compost with anybody, so I'm excited. My name is Devin. I have been working at New York State Parks now for the past 7 years. I started as an intern here, and actually the dog waste compost program was my very first project. And since then I've grown. I spent 6 years doing environmental education here at Marsha P. Johnson State Park and at 5 other parks throughout the New York City region. And most recently, I just took on the role of park manager within the last year, a little over a year, here at Marsha P. Johnson State Park. So I am here full-time overseeing the compost program amongst all other maintenance and operations. You can see we've got a picture coming up of just sort of a little scene in our park. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, we're right across. I'm right across the way, right? Maybe I see us on the other side.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for being here. So Devin, can you describe the park, the location, the setting for those that aren't familiar with where you are and what the size of your dog park is?
Yes. So as I mentioned, the dog run is part of Marsha P. Johnson State Park, which was formerly known as East River State Park back when the compost program was created. And Marsha P. Johnson State Park is a 7-acre park along the East River waterfront in the Williamsburg neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. So for those who are unfamiliar, the Williamsburg is a very popular neighborhood in New York City with over 150,000 residents. So the park serves a lot of people and their dogs. And it's also just a very popular spot for visitors to come and check out our really iconic views of the East River and the Manhattan skyline. So we see a lot of people here, both in our dog run and just generally throughout the park. And the dog park, we actually have two. We have a small dog run and a large dog run, which together are nearly 5,000 square feet.
Excellent. That's great. And how many dogs and owners would you say visit your park?
So I don't have exact numbers on this, but I would estimate that on, a more inclement weather day, we would get a couple of hundred people, but on a nice day, we'll see well over 1,000. So yeah, I would say we don't actually count dogs. We just count human attendance. But I would say that we probably multiply that by 2 or 3, because people usually bring 1 to 2, sometimes 3 dogs with them to the dog run.
So lots of opportunities. To pick up dog waste.
Always busy here.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so the visitors that come with their dogs, how do they pick up after their dogs that works best for your composting program?
So we offer pooper scoopers. We went through a whole trial of different types of pooper scoopers and found ones that work best for our dog run. And then we also offer paper bags as an alternative for people who are more comfortable picking up with a bag.
And how have participants or visitors responded to the program over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say positively, in my opinion, no news in this kind of situation is good news, and we rarely get any complaints about it. So, yeah, I think it's gone pretty well so far. The park actually underwent an extensive renovation this past almost 2 years now, starting in 2021. So we did have to put the dog waste compost program on hold for a while. And I do think people missed it. We had a lot of people asking when it was going to come back, which I think is a good sign. And I just think that people really like to do whatever they can to help protect the environment. And this is just one unique way that we offer people to help, prevent waste from going to landfills and prevent waste from ending up in the river. So yeah, I think people like it. No complaints.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it, especially if people are asking for it. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the program a little bit. Who's running the program, doing the actual work? Is it volunteers or is it part of the staff duties?
Yeah.
Can you say about that?
Good question. So the park staff are really running the program. The only public involvement that we have is with the actual collection of the waste. So like I said, we offer people pooper scoopers, paper bags, or if they don't want to participate, they can use their own bags and throw it away in the trash can. But yeah, the park staff run it. We have bins inside of the dog run that are dog waste only bins. And so that's where we collect the waste. And then twice a day, our staff will empty those waste only bins into a larger nitrogen storage bin is what we call it. And that's where we sort of collect the waste to begin the compost process once we've gotten enough.
Right. Okay, good. So since the staff are involved and kind of charged in making sure that this continues, was it easy to get their buy-in and, kind of get them to participate and weave this into their day? How did you work that out?
Yeah, I think staff warmed up to it pretty quickly. I mean, there's obviously the initial ick factor, and it varies so much person to person. Some people have dogs, some people are dog lovers, some people less so. But everybody who works here has had to participate in some fashion, and they all get used to it. Some people are totally fine with it. And we have a few core people who kind of really keep up with it and maintain it, our morning staff and our evening staff. We've set it up to be really clean. So for the most part, I mean, we're not really we only compost maybe once a year. So the real work is just kind of dumping the waste from one bin to another. And we've set it up so that it's really clean. Everyone has access to the PPE they need. It's exposed to the elements too. So it doesn't smell as bad as you think it would. And then we've got trash grabbers to pull out any plastic waste or any contaminants. So yeah, pretty much part of their daily routine.
Great, great. Would you say how many of the dog owners use their own bag? Do you still find lots of your typical plastic bags in there?
Yeah, I was actually just putting together the data on that. So we keep data on how many plastic bags we pull out of the system. We do not keep data on how many plastic bags go into the trash can. So I think a lot of people just kind of habitually use their own bags. They throw it away in the trash can, and that's that. But we really had the benefit of launching this program with the opening of the dog run. So we were able to sort of form habits. I know everybody has habits going to a dog run already, but just like within our space, we were able to form these habits and work with the community really early on. So the plastic contamination issue has gotten a lot better since we started. I think we probably pull out between like 1 and 3 bags a day, which really in the grand scheme of things isn't so bad when you have thousands of people visiting the dog run every day.
Yeah, I would agree on that one for sure. Talk
Yeah.
about cost. What's the cost to run a program like this?
So your upfront cost is going to be, the bins. And that was really the big thing. But the annual cost is super minimal for us. We buy paper bags, which is pretty much it. That's, less than $100 per year to keep the paper bags stocked in the dog run. The most costly thing, I think, is the testing, and just, because we're a public park, out of an abundance of caution, we will test every batch at least once, if not 2 or 3 times, which can become more expensive. But for the most part, it's an incredibly inexpensive program for us to run.
That's great. That's incredible. The 4-bin system that you have, right? You talked about this nitrogen pile, if you will. Can you briefly discuss what that 4-bin system looks like?
So I touched on it a little bit. You can actually see in the background of my Zoom, I've got a wood bin here. Inside of those wood bins, inside of the dog run, we have like plastic trash cans, like U-line plastic 20-gallon or 30-gallon trash cans. And those are clearly marked dog waste only. So, and we specify in our signage everywhere that we don't accept any form of plastic, not even biodegradable or compostable plastic. So that's where the waste initially goes once it's collected, and then we take those bins and dump them into a larger bin, which I believe we have a photo of somewhere on here. Yeah, that's it right there. Go up one more slide to slide number 19. You can actually see. Yeah, so that's one of our staff dumping the bin into the larger storage bin, and then we wait for that bin to completely fill up before we begin the compost process. So that's the second bin, and then the third bin is when we actually start the compost cooking process. We turn all of that waste over into the bin next to it, and if we need to add more carbon, we'll add more carbon, we'll add a little bit of water, and start the compost process. And then once the composting process is done, we do turn it over into another bin where it cures. And we usually like to cure our compost for at least a year, so it'll sit there for a while.
Great. And the carbon source, what do you use, and how do you know how much to add?
Yeah, so we were really lucky in that we found a local carpentry shop that had untreated sawdust that they gave to us in like huge contractor bags. So we've been working off of that sawdust for years. And that I found sawdust is like the best thing. We also sprinkle a little handful of it at the bottom of the dog waste only bins every day to prevent any sticking from inside of the dog run, which helps a lot. And it also helps quell the smell a little bit. And then also the paper bags that people use to collect waste is a form of carbon. We do not have this down to a science. We try to stick to that ratio of 2 to 1. And I think we've gotten better at it over the years, and just trying to control it a little bit more. But yeah, we're pretty much eyeballing it when it comes time to compost, because we have to kind of consider like how much has already gone in there. And then when we turn it over, we will add what we think we need and then troubleshoot accordingly if things aren't, going the way that we want them to go.
Oh, that's good. Seems easy. The weather, it seems like the bins are kind of open, right? And they're in bins, but they're a little open, little airy. How does the weather affect the compost process?
Yeah, the weather has been one of our biggest challenges. We actually redesigned our bins a little bit. We modified our bins a little bit to help account for excess moisture, because here in New York, we get a lot of weather, as you know, Ryan. So we were experiencing, like, one of our bigger issues towards the beginning of the program is that we were getting excess moisture and we were using a lot more sawdust up front. And so when it came time to compost the pile, a lot of it had already started composting because we were getting water into the bin. So as I mentioned, we went through this renovation over the last few years, and we ended up changing out our bins because it was time. And so to combat that issue, we added like a plexiglass top, which I do think has been helping, but we haven't gone through compost cycle yet, so I can keep you up to date on that.
Yeah, we'll have to get you back and get an update on that one.
Yeah.
That's good. Interesting. Any idea how much poop you've collected and composted?
I wish we had like better data on this, but we do have some challenges with the substrate in our dog run, as you can see, is pea gravel, which becomes a challenge when you're trying to pick up waste, and when you're counting on the public to pick up waste. Oftentimes a lot of pea gravel gets into the system and we're weighing it up front, so it's a little bit tricky to get an exact number here, but I'd say, based on the data I do have, we collect an average of like 5 to 6 pounds of waste per day, which adds up to about 2,000 pounds per year. So ultimately, over the course of like the 5 or 6 years that we've had the program running, I could say we would easily have composted 10,000 pounds of dog poop.
Great. It sounds like great statistics to me. So
yeah, 10,000 pounds is not in the landfill, so that's good.
It's a lot of poop not in the landfill, so that's great. So if we can just talk about how the program got started, right? This is not a everyday run-of-the-mill program. So tell us how it got started, who initiated it, who was involved, was there inspiration, anything along those lines?
Sure. So New York State Parks constructed the Marsha P. Johnson State Park, formerly East River State Park, dog run in 2016 as a result of a huge effort among community leaders, the Parks Department, and then local residents who really wanted to bring a dog run to this part of the neighborhood. So one of the big questions that we had going into the project was how to best manage the waste generated from the dog park. So our regional director, Leslie Wright, who was featured in the video that I think was sent out to everybody, she was actually the one to really raise the question of alternative methods of dog waste management. And I was, like I said, a brand new intern at the time. I had been brought on to do kind of special environmental projects, including environmental education. So my first big project was to just do a bunch of market research and to reach out to anyone else that I could find that was involved in dog waste composting at the time. Rose really helped me out. Rose was one of the first people that I reached out to, so I owe you a lot. I read the Pet Poo Pocket Guide front to back. I reached out to a couple of other people, but there really weren't that many people doing dog waste compost at the time. So from there, we just kind of determined what process would work best for the park, and we worked from there.
And how long would you say it took to get the program actually started, from concept to, okay, we're collecting dog waste?
Yeah, so I started in January of 2016, and the dog run opened in June of 2016. So that long. It was pretty much all consuming up until that point.
Great. Everybody wanted to do it. You just started doing it. I love that.
We just did it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so have there been any changes with the signs, the bins, the bags since the program set up? Anything that you've learned that you've adjusted?
Minorly, yeah. Like I said, we did replace the bins. The biggest reason for replacing the bins was that the pea gravel that we get in the compost puts a lot of pressure on the wooden compost bins, and we just have standard wooden bins, nothing special. So they were starting to fall apart a little bit, and with the park renovation and everything sort of getting a big upgrade, we decided to upgrade our bins as well. The signs we haven't updated recently. I think they're sort of maybe on the market for an update soon. But pretty much the whole process has been consistent. There were no real major insurmountable issues that we needed to overcome. We created a sieve to sift out the pea gravel for the end result. So that's kind of one process that we have to go through that probably not everybody has to do. We have to, that's actually the most laborious part of the whole thing, is sifting out the pea gravel. But yeah, no major changes.
It's a working product. So
yeah.
All right, Deb, final question. Have you used the compost, and where is it? And what have been the results of that?
Yeah, we do use the compost. So like I said, we always test our compost, sometimes 2 or 3 different samples, to make sure that everything is up to the US Compost Council's top standard. And then out of an abundance of precaution, again, we only really use the compost in areas of the park that are not accessible to the public. So areas that are fenced off, garden beds, things like that. We have a pollinator meadow that is fenced off in order to protect the nesting pollinators. So we use it in there. And so far so good. We don't have any real scientific results or data on like how it compares to other compost, but things are growing. So I think it's working.
That's great, actually. And you know what, I'm realizing I'm skipping over one of my questions, but it's an important one.
Okay.
And so any key lessons that you'd like to share with the group, or anybody who's going to be watching, to anybody who wants to maybe copy your program?
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots. I mean, with any program like this, there's a lot of key lessons, and it's a lot of learned by trial and error. I think for this, I would say I co-managed the program from a distance for a long time. So I was working in a regional capacity with the park manager who was working here. But this is a system that does sort of require a lot of precision to do it properly. And we have a lot of people that have their hands in it, which is really great. But I would suggest for somebody who's trying to replicate this program that having somebody who really understands the process on site to be there all the time to oversee the operation of it and make sure that the proper data is being collected and that the ratios are appropriate and that issues are being troubleshooted as they're popping up would be incredibly helpful. This was a brand new pilot program when we started. There weren't a whole lot of other groups doing this in the same way that we were. So we've learned a lot. One of the things that I've learned is that the program is pretty resilient. So even if we're not hitting the temperatures that we wanted to hit, or if we're not doing everything perfectly, we've never had a batch come back bad. So as long as it looks and smells like compost, we take every precaution we possibly can to make sure that it's safe to use and that it's going to be okay for the plants and for the people coming through our park. But it's pretty resilient. So as much as we want to, stick to the recipe and hit those temperatures and have it go according to plan, it's been working in spite of that.
Grassroots or not, you're diverting dog waste from the landfill. You're making the world a better place. So I appreciate that and think you're doing great stuff, and I look forward to hopping over the river to come check it out. But I hope everybody comes back to the next Talks in 10 to be continued. We'll see everybody then. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world.